Avraham, Father of mercies, we worship you, Lord. We thank you for this time together. Lord, we ask that as we dig into your word today, that you will speak boldly into our hearts and our lives, that we will receive what you have in store for us today, that we will leave this place transformed, refined by the fire of your presence, ready to encounter the world around us with the good news of Messiah Yeshua. Lord, I thank you for everything you have done, everything you will continue to do as we move through the remainder of our service today, and we give you free will to move in our midst. B'Shem Yeshua Meshachinu. In the name of Yeshua our Messiah we pray, and everyone says, Amen. So this week we read Parasha Sh'mini, as we said earlier, Leviticus 9:1 through 11:47, which picks up with the discussion of the consecration of the Kohanim as it was left off in Parashat Zav. Aaron and his sons were consecrated and commanded to stay in the Mishkan, or the tabernacle, for 7 days. Then Parasha Sh'mini picks up with the 8th day, hence the name in Hebrew, after their consecration, in which their actual ministry begins officially. Aaron makes a series of offerings, and then at the end of chapter 9, he blesses Bnei Israel, which is presumably the Birkat Kohanim, the priestly blessing that he spoke over them. He and Moses go back into the tent of meeting, and then when they came back out, they blessed Bnei Israel, all of the children of Israel again, and the glory of Adonai appears before the nation, which was followed by a divine fire coming from the presence of Adonai and devouring the burnt offering on the altar. All of Israel saw this occur, and they immediately fell on their faces before the Lord. The next thing we see is Leviticus 10, where Aaron's two oldest sons, Nadab and Abihu, become overly eager with what I believe is a misplaced zeal, and rush into the presence of Adonai with the Eish Zarah, or the strange or unauthorized fire, which was not commanded. The fire of the Lord then consumed them, and they died on the spot. Moses instructs Aaron and his remaining two sons, Eleazar and Ithamar, on how they are to mourn while consecrated. Because remember, the priest can't interact with a dead body when they're in service, right? So he couldn't run over and grab his dead sons and cry over them or anything like that. So and this is a new thing, right? They just got consecrated. They haven't had to deal with this yet. And now the Lord's like, okay, well, here we are. It's time. Let's lay this out. Here's how you're to mourn when you're consecrated, you're in service before the Lord. Here's how it's supposed to look and what you're supposed to do. He also instructs him on exactly how they are to approach the tent of meeting while in service as Kohanim, which includes not drinking alcohol before going in, as some hypothesize based off of the inclusion of this verse here that Nadab and Abihu may have been drunk when they rushed in with the Eish Zarah, the strange fire, because of Leviticus 10:8 through 11. Although I don't necessarily subscribe to this theory, I'm not saying it's outright wrong. I wasn't there. I don't know for sure. But I think in the overarching context that it's more likely that their heart was in the right place, but they were out of order with a misplaced zeal, right? The priest, what was their job? Their job was to enter into the presence of God, right? And here they see the presence of God before them. This huge thing just happened in front of the entire nation of Israel, and they were hungry for it. They were eager, and they rush in out of order, right? They had the right heart, but did things the wrong way, and they rush in out of order. And Leviticus 10, where the series of commands for how the priest is to act at the tabernacle, I don't think it so much had to do with what Nadab and Abihu did or didn't do, but rather the Lord prescribing what the proper order and etiquette for the priestly service in the tabernacle is supposed to be. Then we read Leviticus chapter 11, which closes out Parasha Sh'mini and details with painstaking care the kashrut laws for Israel, that what could be eaten and what can't be eaten. And it seems a little out of place, right? You deal with the consecration of the priesthood, you deal with the Nadab and Abihu dying, the proper order and etiquette for the priest and service in the tabernacle, and then randomly God's like, oh, by the way, you can't have pig or catfish. Just here, I forgot that. Let me throw this one in here. But in the overarching scheme of things, it's not as out of place as it may seem, because what we're beginning to deal with in this section of Leviticus and moving forward is a concept called taheh and tamor, or pure and impure, clean and unclean. And when we're dealing with the presence of God, when we're dealing with the tabernacle, everything is divided by taheh and tamor, what is clean and what is unclean, actions that are clean, actions that are unclean, things that we can interact with or not interact with that are clean or unclean. And so we move from the orderly, proper etiquette of the priesthood and what is taheh and tamor for their service in the tabernacle. And as we often see in the scriptures, is a description for the priesthood and then a description for the greater nation of Israel. And so the next thing is we transition to the nation of Israel. What is taheh and tamor in terms of what we can or can't eat in Leviticus 11. We see similar with the Parasha Sh'mini, which deals with the holiness codes for the nation of Israel, and then immediately following Parasha Sh'mini, we have the holiness codes for the priesthood. So you've got for the nation, and then you've got for the priesthood, because the priesthood was always to stand as an example before the nation of Israel, who then was to stand as an example before the nations around them of what the presence of God in the midst of his people looks like. Now, so we get ready to move towards kind of dealing with some of our Parsha more direct today. I want to kind of talk with you for a minute about when Danielle and I were expecting Eliana, when Danielle was pregnant with Eliana. You ever heard somebody make the phrase, like talking to a pregnant woman, like, you're just glowing, like there's this radiance, you're glowing, right? And I heard people say that all the time. And then when Danielle was pregnant with Eliana, and you actually see it, right? There's something about the countenance that changes in a mother when they're carrying a baby, when they've got a child in womb. There's something about the countenance that dramatically changes and stands out. And I think it's really interesting that when that changes, when that glow becomes a thing, is when they begin to carry something new, someone new within them, right? And as I started thinking about this, I started realizing, especially dealing with this week's Parsha, how true that is in our spiritual lives as well. Because the reality is I walk with the Lord, when people say, hey, there's something about you, there's something radiant about you, there's something, it's not because of me. It's because there's something greater in me. There's something extra. There's something new. There's something boiling over within me in the presence of God within my life. And I was thinking about Danielle being pregnant with Eliana and Natanel both. Eliana, I think it stood out more because we had waited so long to have kids. After 4 years of trying and being told by the medical community it would never happen. And then here we are with a baby on the way. And it was funny because she was really nervous the first 6 months of her pregnancy. That something was going to go wrong, that something could happen, we could lose a baby. And me, on the other hand, I'm sitting there going, look, after everything we went through, do you really think God's going to fulfill his promise or his desire he's placed on our heart to be parents, and then just rip the rug out from under us the football in Peanuts, and just yank it away and watch us flop back on our tails? Do you really think? So I was dead set, God did this, God's not taking it away. I believe no matter how weird or how bad things get or how complicated things get, and it did. She went into preterm labor at 27 weeks and was already dilating, and all of this. I mean, things were a little hectic for a little while there. She was on bed rest for 7 weeks with bathroom privileges only. All she was allowed to do was get up to go to the restroom. Other than that, she laid on the futon in our living room in our college apartment for 7 straight weeks while I was in and out to work and class and whatever else. But even in the midst of that, there was this radiance, there was this excitement, there was this anticipation. And I think about that as believers. There's this beautiful image in that description, especially in the idea of us participating in creation. There's this beautiful idea in the image of that other dwelling within us, changing our countenance before the world around us, and the recognition of what other people see. And that's what we're called to, right? As followers of Yeshua, this is how we are to live our lives every single day. We have the power and presence of the Shekhinah, the divine glory of the Lord within us, and the indwelling of His Ruach HaKodesh, of His Holy Spirit. It's time that we start living like His presence is actually in our lives while we are in fact living. Unfortunately, a lot of people get to the end of the line and go, oh, maybe now's a good time to cry out to the Lord, right? How many have found themselves in a car accident and the last thing you do is, oh, God, save me, right? Whatever was happening the hour before that, odds are your brain wasn't so much on God, but all of a sudden, when things get rough, oh, God, save me, right? What if those of us who have actually experienced the saving power of God started to walk in the countenance of the indwelling presence of God in a very real way while we're actually living And maybe, try living for the kingdom in the midst of that. The body of Messiah has been crying out for revival for generations upon generations. I've spent my entire life in the Messianic Jewish movement, and the number one thing I hear at every conference and every event is this is an end-time revival, and we need to pray for the move of God to fall on us like it did in the 60s and 70s in the Jesus movement. And every time I hear it, all I can think is, God hasn't stopped moving, right? There's only ever been one revival. It started in Acts chapter 2, and either we're a part of it or we're not. But that's not God's problem. God's not the problem. He doesn't take his Spirit away from us, right? It's how dedicated, devoted, how consecrated we decide to be in walking in him. And so as I think about this idea of the body of Messiah, and especially Messianic Judaism for generations upon generations crying out for revival, God's saying, I've got it. It's here. It's already there. All you got to do is walk in it. All you got to do is step in and continue to walk forward in revival. It's there. Like, you're not asking for anything new. In fact, the word revival, the word revive means that something had to be alive already. In order to revive it, it had to be alive already, right? So that means his Spirit hasn't died. It's our interaction with that Spirit that has died. And so when we're crying out for revival, we don't need to cry out for the Lord to revive anything. We need to change our lives that we walk in his living Spirit in our lives so that our countenance changes in a way that the world around us sees his presence in our midst. We have something within us that the world around us desperately needs to see, that they need to encounter, likely more now than ever in the history of creation. If you aren't paying attention to the world around you, and I'm not saying pay attention to CNN, Fox News, BBC, whatever, pay attention to the actual world around you. It's time we wake up, people. It's time we wake up. I mean, I don't know if you guys are paying attention, but the very idea, and it's not often that I dive into stuff like this in a message, all right? I've been talking about this for weeks with people in different places, but the very idea of Iran and Saudi Arabia becoming buddies and a global superpower concept scares the crap out of me, to be perfectly honest. Because that is the very definition of Sunni and Shia coming together as one, which does not look good for Israel. And you guys have heard me say before, we don't need to worry about what's happening in the U.S. quite so much in terms of end-time prophecy. What we need to be paying attention to is the Middle East. Egypt, Israel, Jordan, what we know is Jordan now, Turkey, Syria, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, that area. All of biblical prophecy is hinged on that part of the world. And we need to, when we're watching signs of times and seasons, we need to watch that. That's where we need our focus at, right? And I don't know if you've noticed or not, but when you read Matthew 24, there's a lot of really interesting things that Yeshua says in Matthew 24, Luke 21, other places that appear to be happening. Look at the earthquakes in Turkey and Syria. Unreal. The fact that Iran and Saudi partnering with China, Russia, Brazil, and a few others are actually becoming kind of buddies. I mean, in the backside, yeah, they probably already were doing things shady anyways, but they're now like in the world focus doing things together. The fact that that's happening is all the sign that I need to realize that what we read about in the scriptures of the entire world turning against Israel before Mashiach's return is imminent. And I'm not saying it's going to happen tomorrow. I'm not even saying it's going to happen in the next decade. I mean, I will say it might. The evidence is there that it could be. But I'm not going to put a date on it. But we need to be aware and alert of what's happening around us. And then you look at all of the agenda stuff that's happening in the world around us. And I'm not going to dive into which one or what, but everybody's got an agenda they're trying to shove down everybody's throat. And much of it has zero to do with the Bible. In fact, much of it is contrary to the Bible, right? We are watching prophecy being fulfilled before our very eyes. And it's not just the agenda side of things. It's not the political sphere. It's not any of that we should be paying attention to. It's that in connection to what is happening in the Middle East that we should be aware of and paying attention to, because things are happening around us and speeding up rapidly. And the Lord tells us to keep our eyes on the signs and times and seasons for a reason, so that we are alert, ready, and prepared, so that we're not the five virgins holding the empty lantern when Yeshua approaches going, oh, I thought we had more time. Every generation since John wrote Revelation has believed that their generation was the day. And every one of them is wrong. And we could too. We could be wrong also. But I'm telling you that the evidence is there that this could be the generation that sees some of these things actually be fulfilled. And we need to be aware, alert, and ready. We need to have our lanterns full, and we need to have backup oil ready to go, and we need to be walking in the power and presence of the Ruach HaKodesh in such a way that that light begins to emanate and shine and carry on, that fire begins to spread to others around us. I'm not going to say I don't know how I got there, because I do, but that wasn't in any of this. So that's your appetizer, but no, I mean, it all connects, though. It's all important. As we look a little deeper at Parasha Sh'mini Day, I want us to hone in on a vital concept for our walks with the Lord today. And as we do, I want us to keep this principle in mind. We're the dwelling place for the Ruach HaKodesh, so others may see the presence of God in our midst. One more time. And actually, join with me on this. And as we come to it later, I'm going to have you say it with me again, because I think this is important as we work through this message for us to actually cleave to, all right? All together. We are the dwelling place for the Ruach HaKodesh, so that others may see the presence of God in their midst. And I want you to understand, for me, I think the most important part of that statement isn't that they see him in us. They should see him in us, but they need to want to see him in their life too, because of what they see in us. Now let's dig into the text a little bit together. Leviticus 9, 1 through 4. If you have your scriptures, go ahead and open up there. If you don't, we've got it on the screens for you slackers. It's okay. No, we're... I used to joke and say, what'd you think you were coming here for today? But one day somebody's going to take my sarcasm the wrong way. Now, verse 1 of Leviticus 9. Now it happened on the 8th day that Moses called Aaron, his sons, and the elders of Israel. Then he said to Aaron, take a calf from the herd for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering, both without blemish, and offer them before Adonai. You are to speak to Bnei Israel, saying, take a male goat for a sin offering, along with a calf and a lamb, both yearlings, both without blemish, for a burnt offering, plus a bull and a ram for fellowship offering to sacrifice before Adonai, along with a grain offering mixed with oil, for today Adonai appears to you. In tradition, Jewish tradition, the number 8 is a really important number. It's symbolic of a number of things, but most importantly, it is directly connected to creation. Now, you may be sitting here thinking, how in the world is 8 connected to creation? God created in 7 days, 6 days, and then he rested on the 7th day. How is 8 connected to creation, right? More specifically, I like to say 8 is connected to the idea of recreation. In Bereshit, in Genesis, we see Adonai created the world, everything around us in 6 days. And then he rested on the 7th day. And in this, we see the 7 as the number of perfection or completion. The number 8 comes immediately after 7. I know, hard to imagine, right? 6, 7, 8. That's why 6 was afraid of 7. The number 8 comes immediately after 7 and is symbolic of God's creation. More specifically, humanity takes part in God's creation on the 8th day. For 6 days, he spoke creation into existence. The 7th day became Shabbat. And he rested, and the 8th day, Adam and Eve, began to care for God's creation. They began to take part in the creation itself. We see this pattern in the priestly consecration as they are consecrated for their ministry and then were commanded to remain in the tabernacle for 7 days following their anointing. Then Sh'mini opens up with the 8th day after their consecration, as they are called before the Lord and officially begin their service in the tabernacle by making a series of offerings on the altar and beginning the daily offerings that bookended the day of the tabernacle, the morning and the evening offerings. It is on this 8th day when Aaron and his sons not only take on the work of the work of the mantle of the priesthood, but they begin to symbolically reenact the 8th day after creation when mankind begins to care for God's creation. This is a symbolic foreshadowing of the reality of recreation in Messiah, Yeshua. But in these first few verses of Parasha Sh'mini, we see the ultimate reality of what God is trying to reveal to us. And what he later solidifies in the divine fire upon the altar at the end of chapter 9. Verse 1 says that on the 8th day, Moses called Aaron, his sons, and the Zechanim, or the elders of Israel, to come forward. In verse 2, we see the beginning of the description of the first offerings Aaron is going to make in the service in the tabernacle. But it is the wording of the last few words of verse 2, especially in Hebrew, that are beginning to set up for us a deeper understanding of what is really happening here in the consecration of the priesthood. At the end of verse 2, in the middle of in the English and the TLV, we see these words. Leviticus 9, verse 2 says, "And offer them before Adonai." And offer them before Adonai. In Hebrew, this phrase says, "Vayachrev lifnei Adonai," literally, and offer them before the face of Adonai. It doesn't just say offer them before God, right? It's not like God is separate from it, that God isn't interacting with what's happening, that God isn't actually present in the midst of what is going on here. It specifically says, offer them before the face of Adonai. Then we read at the end of verse 4 in the Hebrew, Ki hayom Adonai nira alechem, literally, for today Adonai will see or look toward you, which is translated as we see here in the TLV at the end of verse 4, Leviticus 9, verse 4, for today Adonai appears to you. But the Hebrew more specifically says not just that Adonai is going to appear before you, but that in your making an offering before the face of God, God is going to look upon you. He's going to look at you. He is going to look at you with his countenance, with his face, with his presence towards you. You are going to see his presence, and that's what happens when the fire falls. The nation of Israel literally sees the divine presence of God, not the fullness of his Shekhinah, but they see the presence of God there before them. What we see in the Lord is the Lord telling Moses and Aaron that they will see the presence, the Shekhinah, the divine glory of Adonai. And this is being made possible by the sacrificial work of the Kohanim, of the priests, which is a symbolic foreshadowing of the work of recreation and the sacrifice of Yeshua. Through the recreation work of Aaron on the 8th day, the day of recreation, Israel would be able to encounter the glory of God in a very tangible way. After this, we read of the first offerings that Aaron and his sons make in the service as the Kohanim in the tabernacle. Then we come to verse 23 and 24 of Leviticus 9 that says, Moses and Aaron then went into the tent of meeting. When they came back out and blessed the people, the glory of Adonai appeared to all the people. Fire came out from the presence of Adonai and devoured the burnt offering and the fat on the altar. When all the people saw it, they shouted and fell on their faces. Now keep in mind, as we just read in verse 2, the Lord tells Aaron that today, on this specific 8th day, he would make his glory appear to Israel. And this is very literally what he does. But the reality goes much deeper. And remember, as we said with the Hebrew in the first few verses, he says, you're going to make an offering before the face of the Lord, in the Hebrew, before the face of the Lord, and then he is going to appear to you, is how the text translates it, but it specifically says he is going to look towards you, look upon you. He is going to look at you as you make this offering before his face. In verse 4, the Hebrew tells us that through the sacrificial work of recreation of the Kohanim, that Adonai would look toward Israel. And here in verse 23, the Hebrew says, Vayera kavod Adonai el kal ha'am. Vayera is from the same root word that we see in verse 4 with the word nirah, the root word ra'ah, meaning to see. So in verse 4, we see that because of the offerings of the Kohanim that they're going to make before the face of the Lord, he will look toward Israel. And in verse 23, we see that because of the symbolic work of recreation that Israel now experiences, that they can look upon the glory of Adonai, which has now filled the Mishkan. So they made an offering before the face of the earth, before the face of the Lord. The Lord now looks upon them and has appeared to them. And now Israel, because of this offering, which has made the tamor go away and the taheh come in, the unclean gone away and the clean brought in, right? We were unclean, we are washed clean. Aaron is commanded to make sacrifices for atonement sacrifice for his sins and for the sins of the people. right? And so we see that the uncleanliness, the tameh of Israel is removed, the tamor of Israel is removed, the taheh of Israel is brought in, because now it's been replaced with the cleanliness of the presence of God before them. And so we see this imagery connected here of the clean and unclean, and the necessity for the presence of God to dwell in our midst. There must be a separation of clean and unclean, that the unclean must be removed. That doesn't mean that if you are unclean, you're kicked to the curb. What it means is that God wants to remove your filth. He wants to remove your uncleanliness. He wants to take that away. Like, we have this weird gospel in the 21st century world that, in essence, stops at God wants to meet you where you are. And that's all we want people to know. God wants to meet you where you are. And that is 100% true, but it's not 100% all that there is. Because God doesn't want us to stay where He met us. God wants to take us where He wants us to be. God wants to take us to the next place. And every single day of our life, there should be something getting hacked out of our life that is unclean, that is creating a barrier. You've heard me say it time and time again. My core definition of sin is anything in our life that damages the image and likeness of God in which we were created. Right? Anything that damages. So if people look at us and they're not seeing the presence of God, there's something in our lives that is hindering that. And we need to get our lives right with the Lord. And if we're honest about it, every day that we breathe the breath of life, we're that guy. And we need to approach the throne, and we need to ask the Lord to remove that crap out of our lives so that we can be the best example of His presence in the world, that we can be for His glory and not for our own. Then once Israel has seen the glory of Adonai, once they have encountered His presence, we read, Veitetze esh milfanei Adonai. Literally, fire came forth from the face of Adonai. The Hebrew, fire came forth from the face of Adonai. You will make an offering before the face of the Lord. He will look at you. You will be able to see Him, because the unclean is removed and the clean is brought in. And fire will come from the face of the Lord that then will consume that offering on the altar. This fire from the face of the Lord consumes the burnt offering. So in verse 2, Aaron is called to bring the burnt offerings and to offer them before the face of the Lord. Then we read in verse 24 that when Aaron made the offerings, fire came forth from the face of God and consumed those offerings before the entire nation. This is followed by the words, Vayara kal ha'am, vayaronu, vayiplu al penehem, verse 24 of Leviticus 9. When all the people saw it, they shouted and fell on their faces. All right, so track this. You're making an offering before the face of God. The Lord is going to look upon you. He's going to direct His face at you. Very literally what we say when we're saying the Ruach HaKodesh, the priestly blessing, right? The Lord will direct His face towards you. You will now be able to see the presence of God because of the uncleanness that has now been removed from your midst. You have been made pure, and the impurity has been removed, much like the song Refiner that we sang during worship, right? You see this beautiful image going on. Then fire comes from the face of the Lord, consumes the offering. And then, what does Israel do? The next thing Israel does when they see the fire consume the offering is they shout, which, if we pay attention to the history of Israel, very likely it may have been a shout of fear. I'm not going to say it couldn't have been. I think more likely it was a shout of worship and adoration about the presence of God. Because remember, this wasn't anything new. Like, this wasn't quite as frightening as what occurred on the mountain, right? On the mountain, they were afraid of the voice of God, because not only did they see the presence of God on the mountain, not only did they hear the heavenly sounds and the shofar blast and everything, but they heard the literal voice of God speak, and it shook them to their core, and they became afraid and said, we can't do that anymore. Moses, you got to hear it. Bring it back. We'll do whatever He says. Just don't let us hear it, man. This is frightening, right? So this isn't a new experience. This is something they're quite accustomed to at this point. So I legitimately believe that they fell on their faces in worship before the Lord. They brought an offering before the face of God. The Lord looked towards them with His face. Fire, the uncleanness was taken away, so they were able to see the presence of God. The fire came from the face of God. And then Israel fell in worship before the Lord. And they fell what? On their faces before the Lord. The offering is made before the face of Hashem. Then fire comes from the face of Hashem and it consumes the offering. And when Israel sees this miraculous reality occur, their instinct is to fall on their faces and worship before the presence of God. Again, our principle, if you'll join with me. We are the dwelling place for the Ruach HaKodesh, so others may see the presence of God in their midst. Now, why is all of this so important? What are we to take away from Parasha Sh'mini looking at all of this? Well, in Exodus 19, we read this, and you've heard me talk about it time and time again. Exodus 19, verse 3, Moses went up to God, and Adonai called to him from the mountain, saying, say this to the house of Jacob, and tell Bnei Israel, you have seen what I did to the Egyptians and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now then, if you listen closely to my voice and keep my covenant, then you will be my own treasure from among all people, for all the earth is mine. So as for you, you will be to me a kingdom of Kohanim, a holy nation. These are the words which you were to speak to Bnei Israel. Now this is pre-Aseret HaDibrot, pre-10 Commandments. This is right before it. This is pre-Israel rejecting the voice of God out of fear, not healthy fear, not holy fear, not righteous fear, but straight up horror movie fear of the presence of God. They reject the voice of God. So the Lord says to Moses, I want to make the entire nation Kohanim. I want to make the entire nation priests so that they can enter my presence, so that they can encounter me. We hear the voice of God very literally getting to step into that role of priesthood. And then we go, no, I'm good. You go ahead and do that. Anybody ever felt the Spirit of God come on you in such a way that it freaked you out and your immediate reaction was, nope, not feeling that. That's, nope, not me. Not liking that one, right? The years ago, our Shavuot service here at CMC has almost always been a little different every year. And years ago, we were maybe 3 years old, I think it was. The Lord put it on my heart to have on Erev Shavuot, on the evening of Shavuot, which for those that may not be familiar, Shavuot is the biblical commanded feast that comes 50 days after Pesach. It's the day that Exodus 19 and 20 occurred when Israel encountered the presence of God at Mount Sinai and heard the voice of God speak. It's also the exact same day that Pentecost occurs in Acts chapter 2, hence the name Pentecost, 50 days from Pesach. It was God's telling us where everything's happening at, right? And so Erev Shavuot is coming up, and I really felt the Lord put it on my heart that we were supposed to have a healing service at CMC. Now, I'm all about the move of the Spirit of God. Like, I wholeheartedly believe in the Spirit of God and the move of the Spirit of God. I wholeheartedly believe that all of the gifts of the Spirit are active today. But I also am human from time to time and can be very skeptical. And I grew up watching the weird side of Pentecostalism from time to time because my mom was raised in a Pentecostal church. My mom's Jewish, my dad's Jewish, but my mom was raised in a Pentecostal church, and my dad became a believer in a Pentecostal church. And so I've witnessed some of the theatrical side of, I'm trying to find it's probably not the best way to word it, but I'm going to go that route. I'm already there. We might as well run with it. The theatrical side of the move of the Spirit of God. And so I have sort of unhealthy skepticism from time to time of whether or not something is actually of God or not, right? And so the Lord put it on my heart that we were supposed to have this healing service. And I was like, look, I'm all for it, but what if? Like, what if we do this and nothing happens? Like, what if we announce this, we market it, we put it out there, people show up, and nothing happens, nobody gets healed? What if we do this and nothing goes down? And I kept fighting with God over this. I mean, I fought with God over this because I was like, look, I'm all for it. Like, I think it's great. I believe that you heal. I believe that you use people to bring healing in people's life, but we're going to look like fools if nothing occurs. Like, I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm just saying, what if what if you decide not to that night? Like, what happens, right? And so I called a bunch of rabbi friends of mine and pastor friends of mine. I was like, hey, like, I really feel like the Lord's put on our heart to do this, but I'm a little skeptical. Like, I'm stuck at the what if. Like, I'm all for it. I'm gung-ho, but I'm still stuck at the what if. What do I do? And unanimously, every single one of them said, just ignore the what if. Like, the what if's not going to go away. Just ignore it. If God said do it, and you truly believe God said do it, just do it and see what happens. Make room for him to do what he's planning on doing. And the what if's not going to go away, but just trust that God could, right? You're stuck at the what if, but there's the other side of the what if. There's the what if nothing happens, but there's the other side. What if something does? What if lives actually are changed? And so I gave in. I was like, all right, let's do this. Let's just see what happens. And So we started marketing it. We put it out there. We're going to do this healing service. And honestly, a bunch of our people came. Miss Maxine and her husband, Mr. Bob, came. And he had, as a matter of fact, I've known Miss Maxine since Danielle and I were in middle school, high school, something like that. She was at our wedding. I've known Mr. Bob for years, and I don't think I had ever seen him not on a walker in all the years I've known him. And he comes to the healing service, and we pray for him. And I kid you not, we pray for him, and then I move on to, we went to him so that he wouldn't have to come up to the prayer line. And then we move on, and I'm praying for somebody else. Mark was there with me, and a few others were praying with me. And we're praying for somebody, and I happen to open my eyes, because, ADD. I happen to open my eyes, and I look up, and arbitrarily I see Mr. Bob walking back from the bathroom. But he doesn't have his walker. But he's walking back from the bathroom. And then I'm like, oh, that's cool. I go back to praying. I didn't think of it. I saw it peripherally. Oh, that's interesting. Go back to praying. And then I look up again a little while later, and I see Mr. Bob walking laps around the sanctuary with no walker. In fact, he had taken his walker and thrown it to the side. Right? You remember that? He took his walker and threw it and started walking laps around the sanctuary. And then after that, I'm back praying for somebody, and I open my eyes up. Now, here's the thing you got to understand with Miss Maxine and Mr. Bob. Sorry, I'm embarrassing you here, but when Miss Maxine and Mr. Bob were a later in life marriage, and they didn't get to dance at their wedding or their reception together like they would have loved to, because Mr. Bob was on the walker, and he wasn't able to do that. I kid you not, we had music playing in the background, and the Paul Wilbur song, the Paul Wilbur version of Dance With Me, Holy Spirit, Lover of My Soul from Shireen from Song of Songs comes on, which is a really beautiful, melodious song. And I don't know why. The only thing I say is that the Spirit impressed on me. I opened my eyes up. This time it wasn't an ADD distracted open. It was like an actual, what's going on here? Something's going on. And I opened my eyes, and there's Mr. Bob and Miss Maxine in the back of the sanctuary slow dancing to this song. And Mr. Bob comes up to me afterwards and goes, listen, you got to understand how much this means, because we didn't get to dance together at our wedding. And here we are getting a slow dance because of what God did tonight. Now, for almost a month and change later, he had no walker. Now, down the line, at this point, he was in his late 70s, early 80s. For about a month and a half, no walker. I mean, dude, he was running laps around people at Walmart. It was insane. We would run into them at the store, and he's going all out. And then he was back on a walker, and then he was slowly to a wheelchair and a scooter. But for that month and a half, he had the restoration of the ability to walk that he hadn't had before, and the freedom that goes with that, and the ability to slow dance with his wife that he didn't get to have years ago when they got married, and all of this. And we had somebody, and that wasn't the freaky one. That was the really cool one. We had somebody that came, and for the life of me, we've never seen them again. I don't know who they are. They came in, they had this huge growth on their back. I don't know if you remember this or not. They had this huge growth on their back. It was protruding through their shirt. Like you could see the growth on their back. And they came up for prayer. No clue who they are. They weren't a part of the congregation. They heard we were having a healing service, and the Lord put it on their heart, so they showed up. And so we started praying for them. And I laid my hand on that spot. And while we're praying for them, I start to feel something move. I don't mean Tremors, the movie, like the Worms Underground movie, but something changed, and it was weird. I'm like, what in the world? Oh, I forgot we're here for something. Maybe this was God. And we start praying again. And as we're praying over them, I'm physically feeling this growth begin to shrink and completely went away. Again, no clue who they are, never saw them again. But here I was stuck at the what if nothing happens, and God was trying to get me to the what if something does happen. Just let's get to plausible. What if something does happen? And you got to understand, this is what God wants to do in our midst. He wants to move in our midst in such a way that the world around us encounters him. The gifts of the Spirit are not there so that we can put on a cool show and theatrics for people. The gifts of the Spirit are not there so that we can foretell somebody's future job or family or whatever. The gifts of the Spirit are there so that God can show himself through us in the lives of others. The gift of healing is not so that we can have a healing ministry. It's so that God can minister healing in somebody's life that needs his salvation, that needs his restoration, that needs his renewal. And in the same sense, we are allowed through the gifts of the Spirit to participate yet again in the recreation of what God is doing in the midst of his people. And this promise was for the nation of Israel as a whole. This promise to be a nation of Kohanim was for the nation of Israel as a whole, to be a treasured people, a kingdom of Kohanim, a holy nation. And this promise is reiterated again in 1 Peter 2:9, which says, "But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for God's own possession, so that you may proclaim the praises of the one who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light." Why? Not so you got a cool testimony to share with people. Not so you get a cool testimony just to share with other believers, but so that you can proclaim the work of God in your life as he brought you from where somebody else is into his light, so that they can find their way out of the darkness into his light. When we talked about the construction of the Mishkan through the latter half of Exodus, we saw the beautiful reality that the Mishkan, the tabernacle, was a foreshadowing of something greater. It was a temporary dwelling place for the Shekinah, the divine glory of Hashem, to dwell among his people. But this was a foreshadowing of the reality that through the work of recreation and the sacrifice of Yeshua, we, the people of God, would be made the temporary dwelling place of the presence of God. He would very literally place his presence within us through the indwelling of his Ruach HaKodesh. In a very real sense, we have seen the fulfillment of the divine promise of Exodus 19 for Adonai's covenant people to become a nation of Kohanim, fulfilled in the realization of 1 Peter 2:9. And this wasn't something that was specifically only for the Gentile church, right? This isn't the idea that the Gentile church has now taken up the promise that was made to Israel. No, this is for the people of God, Jew and Gentile alike, bought together, made one through the blood of atonement of Messiah Yeshua, as a whole under the construct of the spiritual nation of Israel, become a nation of Kohanim before the Lord, and see the realization of that promise of Exodus 19 fulfilled through the work of Messiah. The Aaronic Kohanim were able to enter the tabernacle and encounter the Shekinah of the Lord. In the same sense as Jews and Gentiles bought by the blood of the Lamb, we have been made able to encounter the Shekinah of the Lord, but not just through a cloud of burning incense as we enter the earthly Holy of Holies, not only once a year, not only through the shroud of smoke and incense covering us, protecting us, shielding us from the presence of God, but instead we get to have his presence very literally reside within us in a real sense, as we are now filled with his Ruach HaKodesh, his Holy Spirit. We see this all come together in a powerful reality in Acts chapter 2 when the Ruach HaKodesh was poured out on the early Messianic Jewish community. Acts chapter 2 verse 1. When the day of Shabbat had come, they were all together in one place. Where was that place? It wasn't some random upper room down the street. That's a confusion of Acts 1 and Acts 2. It's not what's happening here. The only place these events could have happened was out in a big open space like the temple, where Jews were supposed to go on Shavuot because it was a pilgrimage feast, one of the Shalosh Regalim, one of the pilgrimage feasts that we were required to go to Jerusalem to the temple. Suddenly there came from heaven a sound like a mighty rushing wind, and it filled the whole house where they were sitting. And what was the house that they were sitting? It was the tabernacle, or the temple rather. And tongues like fire spreading out appeared to them and settled on each one of them. Sounds a lot like what we just read in Leviticus 9 when the priesthood's consecration was complete. They made their offerings before the Lord, and the fire of God fell on the altar and consumed the offering there. It sounds a lot like the Spirit of God, or the presence of God, being revealed in the fire upon the mountain at Mount Sinai in Exodus 19 and 20. And tongues like fire spreading out appeared to them and settled on each one of them. They were filled with the Ruach HaKodesh and began to speak in other tongues as the Ruach enabled them to speak out. I do not believe they started randomly making click-clack noises or any weird stuff like that. They began to speak. These were all a bunch of dudes from the Galilee and other parts of Israel that began to walk in the renewed blood of Messiah in their life and the salvation that comes through that. These guys spoke Hebrew and Aramaic. They began to speak, I believe, in Hebrew and Aramaic. And the reason why the text tells us that there were Jews and proselytes, Jews and converts from every tribe and tongue, and it names out all the people groups and the lands that they came from, was to show us that these guys all spoke different languages that came together for this pilgrimage feast as the Torah prescribes. And the Lord, through these guys from the Galilee speaking Hebrew and or Aramaic, they began to hear in their ears their own language as Peter and the other disciples began to preach the good news. And their hearts became changed. Very literally, the Tower of Babel, the confounding or confusing of the hearing that we read about in the Tower of Babel, that had to happen because if we all spoke one language, nothing was impossible. In Acts 2, we see the unconfounding through the Ruach HaKodesh of the hearing. so that through one divine language, nothing will be impossible. In Parasha Sh'mini, we see the Aaronic Kohanim participate in the work of recreation on the 8th day, symbolically through the sacrificial work they did in the tabernacle. And in this, he took part in the revelation of the presence of Adonai before the entire nation. Well, Yeshua, our Kohen Gadol, in the order of Melchizedek, became our atonement sacrifice on Pesach. Then, after 7 weeks of 7, on the 8th day, known as Shavuot, because of the work of recreation that he provided for us, he revealed his presence to us once again through the Ruach HaKodesh. Except now, instead of it being contained in the tent in the middle of the nation of Israel, it now resides within each and every one of us, bought by the blood of Yeshua. And in the same way that his presence was revealed to Bnei Israel by divine fire coming down and consuming the offering on the altar, when the Ruach HaKodesh was poured out upon the early Messianic Jewish community, there was again a divine fire that was seen upon the heads of the believers. And this reality of the divine fire upon the heads of the early Messianic Jewish community and the birthings of this now 2,000-year-old revival is so important, because no longer is our access to the Father through the poured out blood of burning flesh and animals being offered upon the altar in the tabernacle or temple. Now our lives have become that very literal living sacrifice. And his all-consuming fire is now burning within us so that we can draw others into his glorious kingdom. Romans 12:1 says, I urge you, therefore, brothers and sisters, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds, tahei and tamor, separation of clean and unclean, pure and impure, so that you may discern what is the will of God, what is good, acceptable, and perfect. The Lord has called us as followers of Messiah, filled with the indwelling presence of the Ruach HaKodesh, to stand out, to be different, to be like the tabernacle in the wilderness and the temple in Jerusalem, where the fire of the presence of God, the column of fire and smoke, could be seen not just by Israel. You got to remember when Joshua sends his spies into Israel, they go into Jericho and they meet with Rahab. What is it Rahab says? Dude, we've been scared to death of what God's going to do through you for 40 years. You guys didn't believe it, but we did. You were stuck on the what if nothing, and we knew the what if something. Like, we heard what God did in Egypt. We heard what God's done through the wilderness. We've heard about how your God very literally in his own presence leads you. We've been shaking our sandals. Almost said boots, but they didn't have those then. We've been shaking our sandals for 40 years while you guys have been wandering around in circles for no good reason. If you'd have just come in when you should have, it would have all been okay. But hey, it's okay. God's still at work. You may still be stuck on the what if nothing, but it's time that you step out in the faith of what if something despite your fear of what if nothing. You and I have been called to be a living sacrifice. Not for our own sake. See, the priesthood didn't only make sacrifices for Israel. They made sacrifices for themselves. But they only made sacrifices for themselves so that they could make sacrifices for Israel. Because they had to have atonement to be able to make atonement. You and I have been made atoned for. We have been cleansed by the blood of the Lamb. And as such, we now have become a living sacrifice, not for our sake, but for others. We have been made clean so that others can find how to be made clean through the work of the presence of God in our lives. Again, our principle, we are the dwelling place for the Ruach HaKodesh, so others may see the presence of God in our midst. I'd like to ask our worship team to make their way back up to the bema. So what is hindering you from experiencing the fullness of the revival and outpouring in your life? What is preventing you from living your life as a living sacrifice before the face of the Lord? What's blocking you from becoming an offering consumed by the divine fire of the Ruach HaKodesh? Just as Aaron was called to come and encounter the presence of the Lord, you have been redeemed, you have been renewed, you have been restored to live in a continual encountering with his Shekhinah. And just as Adonai promised in Parasha Sh'mini to reveal himself to Bnei Israel, he is yearning to reveal himself through your life to the world around you. So what's holding you back from experiencing the fullness of revival today? What are you letting stop you? Is there hidden, unrepented sin? Are there unrestored relationships with other believers? Are you holding on to past hurts and wounds? Are you dwelling upon the guilt and shame of sins and mistakes long forgiven and washed clean by the blood of the Lamb? Are you cleaving to the lies that the enemy and other people have spoken over you instead of latching on to the truth of who you are in Yeshua? Is your identity rooted in this world rather than in the kingdom of God? See, here's the thing. We are in fact the King's Kohanim. We are a part of a spiritual priesthood called forth in Messiah Yeshua to further the kingdom of Messiah. We are called to make Talmudim, to make disciples of all nations. And by the way, Yeshua doesn't say, make disciples of all nations, baptize in the name of the Father, Son, and the Spirit, and I will be with you until the tribulation, or until just before the tribulation, or until halfway through, or until the end of the tribulation. It says, I will be with you even until the end of the days. Yeshua says, you have a job to do, which is to carry the Shekhinah, the divine presence of God, the Ruach HaKodesh, the fire from the face of God to the world around you. And I will be with you in that task all the way until the end of days, until all is said and done. You have a job to do, and I'm with you. I've got you. I'm taking care of it. I'm paving the way. I've prepared it for you. Yeshua was telling us, look, I've already received all the terrible beatings and death that could come with it. There's nothing left they can surprise you with. Just trust me. Get past the what if nothing and trust in the what if something. But this is a reality that is nearly impossible if we are not firmly rooted in the power and presence of the Ruach HaKodesh within us. You've heard me say 100 times, the world doesn't need more talking head believers. Let me say that again. The world doesn't need more talking head believers. Doesn't need Bible pundits. The world doesn't need us to tell them what they need to be doing. They need to see us living how we're supposed to be living so that they can want what we have. The world around us doesn't need more believers who say one thing but model something entirely different. What the world around us needs today, more than ever before, are followers of Yeshua who are fully and completely devoted to walking in the fullness of the Ruach HaKodesh at all times, in all situations, no matter who we're with, no matter what others may think, no matter what society tells us they think about it. We must be living sacrifices, holy and acceptable to God. Today is the day, folks, for us to recalibrate our faith, to recalibrate our walks with the Lord, to recalibrate our lives and hearts to be in alignment with the revival of the Ruach HaKodesh that has been active since Acts 2. Our principle, one more time. We are the dwelling place for the Ruach HaKodesh, so others may see the presence of God in their midst. Are we truly yearning for revival? Are we truly ready to see what the mighty hand of God has in store for us when we completely submit to his lead? When we are truly walking in humility and faithfulness to being Kedoshim, to being holy ones? Are we ready to encounter the power of God and see him use our lives to impact the lives of those around us? Then let's allow the Ruach HaKodesh to begin a new work of transformation within us, that we truly become the King's Kohanim and live a life that is a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable before the Lord. Avraham, Father of mercies, we worship you, Lord. We thank you for your might and power in our midst. We thank you for the beauty of your Shekhinah, your divine glory that is revealed in your Ruach HaKodesh, your Holy Spirit that dwells within us. Lord, I pray that you will bolster the fire of your presence within us in such a tangible way as we see in Exodus 19, as we see in Leviticus 19, as we see at the end of Exodus, as we see when Solomon completes the temple, as we see with the outpouring of your Ruach HaKodesh in Acts 2, as we see with the renewal of the outpouring of your Ruach HaKodesh among the nations in Acts 10, and as we see over and over and over and over and over again when your people humble themselves in your sight, making their lives an offering before your face, trusting in you coming and consuming that offering up, that we may be made holy and righteous before you, so that your face may shine through our face, so the world around us may see you, your presence tangibly in their midst, and encounter your salvation in a real and true way in their lives. Father, empower us today as we leave this place to walk fervently and faithfully in your presence every single waking moment of our lives, not for our name, not for our sake, not for our glory, but for yours and the glory of your kingdom and your holy name. B'Shem Yeshua Meshachinu. In the name of Yeshua our Messiah we pray, and everyone says, Amen.